Hello and welcome to The Pledge. A cheeky behind-the-scenes snap emerged this week of Cabinet Minister Alan Cairns being interviewed in rather an unusual choice of outfit. Well, it just goes to show not everything is as it seems in the world of television, and some people will do anything for publicity.
I've got no idea what you're talking
Nice. Looking good,
totally sold myself out of this one, didn't I?
Alan's got nothing on you. Coming up on the programme, Rachel says it was right to give Enoch Powell a platform. Phil thinks it's not so straightforward in Syria. Nick tackles contraception for teenagers. And Michelle says there shouldn't be special treatment for Brits banged up abroad. But first, it's me. How ironic that in the week Britain hosted the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, news hits that the children of the Windrush generation from the Caribbean, whose parents were invited here as Commonwealth citizens with the right to live and work, are being denied settled status. In the middle of what's supposed to be a celebration of our renewed, more equal relationship with the Commonwealth, this utter disgrace hardly sends a message of confidence about the trustworthiness of British leaders and the promises they make. Calls for an amnesty for those affected miss the point. These people are not here illegally. There should be no need for costly legal fees or requests to produce old documents. The government simply needs to honour the original agreement, apologise and offer assistance to anyone affected, be it all being denied healthcare or the right to work or been wrongly deported. Failure to do so will diminish our links with the Commonwealth. It's time to show a bit more respect to our elders and stop playing games with Commonwealth citizens as well as British citizens.
It occurs to me, perhaps anyone who's living on a different planet, if you're not aware, you mentioned briefly the Windrush, just to explain, these are people, as you said,
yes,
who came to the UK from the Caribbean starting in 1948.
They were invited over.
Yes, indeed. The Windrush was from the name of the ship, the Empire Windrush. It brought initially workers from Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago. They answered a call from the government for struggling industries such as agriculture and mining under the 1971 Immigration Act. All were given indefinite leave to remain, so important to your conversation. There's around 500,000 people this affects from the Commonwealth countries. Many have been wrongly identified as illegal immigrants because they don't have the official paperwork. Yeah. Now to the meat of the story. I've always been proud to be British, even though I'm half British, because of my late dad. This is an absolute scourge on Britain. I cannot for the life of me work out how I'm living in a country where we have been unable to deport Egyptian-born hate preachers, Algerian-born terrorists and Romanian killers. We are unable to get them out of the country, and yet in some instances we look at people who came here, who have worked for 50 years, who have invited here, who have paid their taxes. We've denied them cancer care. We've put them in immigration centres. We possibly
lost their jobs.
Possibly one lost their life because of the emotional pressure. That's not verified, but possibly. Certainly they've suffered emotional strain, and it is a situation that besmirches every single political party because it was an idea or part of it that seemed to initiate under Labour. It was carried under the coalition. Nobody emerges with any credit. It is an absolute bloody disgrace.
Disgrace. Disgrace. And I think the thing that upsets me most, you know, I'm one of those people, and you know, Afua and I often debate on this issue, and a lot of the time I actually disagree with her sort of stance where race is concerned. And I never use that R word willy-nilly. But I think in this case, if we want to know what institutional racism looks like, it's this. Because it's funny how there are 9 million people in the UK who don't have a passport. And it's funny how when it comes to this issue, we are looking at people of colour. And actually, when you look at immigration in general, particularly Commonwealth immigration, people from countries like Australia, you know, majority white countries, can have ancestry visas. That's not available to people from the Caribbean countries, and because of slavery, the majority of those people have white British ancestors.
And before I yield, I spoke to Trevor Phillips on my radio show, who I think we'll all agree is a force for good in matters such as these, and he said that unfortunately these people just do not have a voice. If it was different ethnic groups or different religious groups, they have one. And it's horrible to say, so they were effectively written off. This is, and as I say, this is absolutely shaming.
Before I bring the rest of everybody else in, can I show David Lammy's speech in the Commons this week?
How many have been denied health under the National Health Service? How many have denied pensions? How many have lost their job? This is a day of national shame, and it has come about because of a hostile environment policy that was begun under her Prime Minister. Let us call it as it is. If you lay down with dogs, you get fleas, and that is what has happened with this far-right rhetoric in this country.
Rachel, do you want to add to this?
I agree, and I think, as you say, the timing could not be worse.
Yeah.
Just when we are, as a country, trying to show an outward face to the world as global Britain, it looks like we've turned in on ourselves.
Even more so.
I mean, we also need to talk about the fact that the Home Office has managed to destroy all these landing cards of the legal immigrants who are invited in. Yeah. And I think we need to look now beyond this crisis and the 3.7 million EU citizens who must be looking at this shambles in absolute abject despair.
Yes. Yeah.
I know somebody who's been sent an 80-page document to prove that he's been living here for the last 15 years.
This is because of post-Brexit, just to explain
they're
worried about their status.
How are they going to be able to continue to live in this country if people who are invited in, the government has actually destroyed the evidence of their immigration?
Well, a previous government.
A previous government, of course.
Yeah.
It's just shocking, but let's put a human face on it, because we've heard a lot of numbers, and actually David Lammy was calling for numbers. Let's hear from Michael Braithwaite, who's 66, who came into this country in 1961.
I feel that I am British, and you can't take that away from me. You know, this is my roots. This is where I belong. You know, and I had that dark feeling of not being part of. And I think that was after being part of a school and part of the team and part of everyone, and to have that taken away from you in a snap of a finger, it was a dark place. My whole world was turned upside down.
So Michael Braithwaite's been termed now an illegal immigrant. We should say that Prime Minister Theresa May has spent a lot of the last 2 or 3 days apologising for this.
Has she done enough?
But, I mean, in my view, I mean, people have recalled the fact that when she was Home Secretary in the Go Home office, it was basically, you know, she said we have to make this country an illegal, an alien environment, a hostile environment for illegal immigration, because illegal immigration is unpopular, let's not forget it, but also the problem here is these were legal.
Yes. And just of course, Michael Braithwaite has now quite rightly been cleared. And just underscore your point before we bring the other. Why does the Prime Minister just slam a desk and say they're all staying?
That's it. That's all she needs to do.
And one other aspect before we bring Michelle in. You haven't mentioned, which I think is shameful, the cost of this, right? Now, it's been calculated that it costs about £400 for the admin to show that you can stay in this country. Do you know how much you're charged? £1,200. Now, to some of these folk who have been driving buses or working in the fields or working in the NHS, £1,200. Why are we making 800 quid out of each case?
Shocking.
I think we should look at what Theresa May has said about this as well.
I want to dispel any impression that my government is in some sense clamping down on Commonwealth citizens, particularly those in the Caribbean who built a life here. I take this issue very seriously. The Home Secretary apologised to the House of Commons yesterday for any anxiety caused, and I want to apologise to you today.
But that's still not enough as far as I'm concerned.
That's too little too late again, isn't it?
Yeah, it
There's
is.
a massive common sense issue with this whole thing for me, do you know what I mean? It just reeks from top to bottom. You know, the paperwork going missing, the fact it was even brought up in the first place. You know, these people are as British as anybody sat around this table, do you know what I mean? So there's absolutely no way this should even be in the forefront, you know what I mean? Let alone labelling people with this, that and the other. It just shouldn't be an issue, full stop for me, which is, you know, it's a shame.
Totally.
But this for me, I mean, my heart breaks for everyone. I can't imagine someone knocking on my door or turning up at my door in the middle of the night or where I work and going, right, you prove your residency or else. I'd be like, oh, I can only just about find my mobile phone sometimes, never mind paperwork dating back years and years and years.
And you need 4 pieces of identification for each year you've been here.
But they've softened that, haven't they now? So for me, this whole thing is just sheer incompetence, because if you look at why this is happening, it's an unintended consequence, isn't it, of some a new immigration policy. And this is why this is now coming to light. And I think, how can you have a situation...
Do you agree, then, with a tougher immigration policy,
I do agree with the tougher immigration
But that's
policy.
for illegal immigrants, not for this.
I agree with the policy that was introduced. I think this is an absolutely
And did you agree with the vans
unintended...
driving around saying, if you're illegally, get out? I paraphrase
Or you risk arrest.
Or you risk arrest. Did you agree with the vans?
Well, I thought that they were a little bit odd, to say the least.
But did you agree with them?
No, but I do think that what they try...
Come on.
I don't have a drama with that at all. I don't have a drama with vans whatsoever.
By the way, they were banned.
I don't have a drama
They
with
were
that.
actually...
Seriously, no. You're breaking the law, you're going to be caught and you're going to be hoofed out of
Don't
it.
you think
Simple
that
as.
just
But
sends
that's a
the
different
wrong
issue.
message about who we are as a country?
No, not at all. You know, it does. A wrong message about what we're doing as a country, do you know what I mean? In you come, do you know what I mean? No. We've decided to draw a line in the sand and we're going to police that line. Is there anything wrong in that? You decide who comes in and out your house, didn't you? Do you know what I mean? That's all this is saying, do you know? Yeah?
But hang on, that helped create this hostile... Do you not accept that helped create this hostile environment?
I can see that she was taken the wrong way, but then, you know, how many times do you have to go down the line before you can get your point across as well, you know?
But this whole thing, like, so I just feel so sorry for the people. I've listened to lots of people on the radio, I've read lots of stories, and I think it is so awful to literally be, when they've been put in detention centres and all the rest of it. It's
Some of them actually
horrible.
deported.
But I just think, well, where is your brain?
There's been at least 3 in Jamaica.
I just think, where is your brain to actually not keep the required paperwork? As a government, I'm talking about. I'm not talking about the people, but as a government, why haven't you got... like central records? Like if you say, look, is this person...
Well, they did
have
have the
tax records, you've got
paperwork.
schools
They
records, you've got work.
destroyed
That's what I mean.
They
That's what I'm
had
talking
it.
about. It's ridiculous.
You know what, June, and I want to go around the table here. If this was a business, the chief executive would almost certainly be gone. I'd be surprised if he or she clung on for this level of shambles. Amber Rudd is still in post. I appreciate some of it happened not on her watch, but we knew about this in November. Newspapers were breaking stories.
Thanks to my sister-in-law, Amelia, gentleman of The Guardian. Congratulations on outstanding reporting.
Who obviously is in the running for Journalist and Campaign of the Year, I would have thought, married to...
Hold on, what were you saying?
If it was a chief exec, I would have thought he or she's probably facing the exit, is leaving the door. Is Amber Rudd fit for purpose? Does she stay? You, Rachel?
Absolutely. I mean, this was not her shambles.
It's been running since November. You've just said yourself.
Nick, to me, that's not the question. The question is not about whether or not we fire Amber Rudd.
Yeah, it's
the
like
question is
passing the
about,
buck again, isn't it? Let's
the question
just look at the
is
system.
about we just need the government to come out and say anybody...
And nobody pays the price.
Unequitably. No, I don't think anybody argues with that point. That those people that came over from Jamaica, Tobago, and all those people have a perfect right. They came here to help us out.
Totally.
They came here to get us out of an hole.
Something that's common to a lot of this. 9 million people without passports, 500,000 people who came over without proper paperwork, is not the answer. I know it's not who we are as a country, but ID cards. I mean, honestly, this means that obviously the Home Office isn't fit for purpose when it comes to the paperwork. Therefore, in order to save people from going through this sort of nightmare, we need some actual, we need proper cards. We need a central database of people. Otherwise, it does not work.
I don't know. I think the ID card is another day. The ID card for me. Do you know what I mean? I think we're straying away from the football here. Someone needs to kick it. Right. Okay. There we go. So, there's been a lot of people talking in the past few days about our decision to strike Syria. But not everyone knows what they're talking about. I've been to Syria. I've been on the front line with the Kurdish forces fighting against ISIS. And the simple fact is that the situation on the ground is more complicated than most people realise. There are hundreds of groups fighting each other. Some are genuine freedom fighters, while others are terrorists. It's not all simple or black and white. We can't fix all of the problems out there, but I know for a fact that our British servicemen and women on the ground trying to make the situation better. What's wrong today is some politicians, yes, you, Jeremy Corbyn, don't accept that the British military have any constructive role to play. It's a dangerous attitude that ignores their bravery and undermines their valuable work.
So, just help me understand what you're saying. So, are you saying that you think that what we did last weekend was the right thing in terms of the strike?
Yeah, so what I'm saying is, when they were trying to throw it open to everybody voting on it, and let's look at what we're doing before we can do it, that's like waving your colours and going, we're going to do this, we're coming. Do you know what I mean? That's no good.
No,
that ain't no good.
Did.
Yeah,
so
that's no good.
So you're for military action,
I'm
but
for
against
military action
Parliament.
if the evidence that's been supplied by the right people on the ground is OK. I'm not for waving that flag and saying we're coming beforehand. which is what is appeared. You know, Corbyn was saying, no, it should be thrown open to a massive vote. No, well, we're putting our cards on the table so everybody can read them before we do anything, is what I was saying.
I think, I mean, you said that you don't think that people do understand how complicated the situation is in Syria, and I would actually say that most people do understand that this is an absolute complicated mess.
You would need, honestly, to unravel it, you'd need a brain the size of a planet.
Absolutely.
It's ridiculous.
So this is, for someone like me, I absolutely don't understand every single inch of what's going on, but I do understand that it's very complicated in terms of multiple things, multiple people, multiple backers, all this. It's an absolute mess.
And so to throw that open to a massive vote where everybody's just dipping in, I mean, for one, Corbyn, I wouldn't trust him with me cat on the weekend, you know what I mean? I really wouldn't. And when it comes to matters of national importance or security even, you know, his dubious friends would probably...
But is it just Corbyn, or are you saying that about Corbyn?
Well,
saying
the point about Corbyn said that we shouldn't do anything with our allies who were at that time, the US and France, without there being a vote in the UN. And then Theresa May correctly pointed out this means that we give the Russians a veto on what we do, on what we do.
12 times.
But further to what you said, it may be helpful or not helpful if we have a quick look at a graphic which actually purports to explain the dynamic of Syria, which to me looks like three-dimensional chess played by at least 15 people. Around the outer rim, you see the main actors in terms of countries in the Syria conflict. In the middle, you will see ISIS. And in those lines, the arrows from the main actors into the centre show how the different actors are both linking with each other and against ISIS. It is completely incomprehensible, isn't it, Phil?
So where I'm coming from with this is, you know, we've got good soldiers out there, and, you know, unfortunately we lost a lad the other day, you know, a sergeant from whatever regiment it come from, it doesn't matter, OK? We're losing soldiers out there. We have got a presence out there. We need a presence out there. But what I'm saying is, let the boys and girls do their job. Because we started all that, all right? We've been out there. We've left a void. We've got to do something about it. As a main power in this world, if we just pull out of that now, all sorts of things are going to pull in.
Hold on, Phil. We started
we were part of the... No, we didn't start. All right, OK. All right, but we were part of the catalyst. The void that we left when we pulled out of Iraq, which was where ISIS filled up, and then the catalyst was... And then all the other stuff going on over there, like I say, if we pull out, he gets done. If they pull out, they get done. So we have an obligation, really, to try and go the long haul with it. Sorry.
Can I ask a question? But if they don't do that, but that's our system. We have to vote on these things. You can't just...
What I'm saying is, on certain things... You know, like this was supposed to be a strike on an installation that was providing chemical weapons. You can't just sort of like, right, everybody, chemical weapons are going to... You wouldn't do that, would you? It's like you're giving your game away before... So, all that sort of stuff. Only certain people should know. Cobra should know, the PM should know, and the people on the ground should know. And outside of that, even other soldiers in the unit don't know what's going on. Do you see what I'm saying? So, you can't be airing all this stuff.
What I found interesting from all of this is, and it's faintly ridiculous for me to lecture about military operations with you sitting around the table, but the key element is surprise in virtually every military operation you can think of, so it is absurd. I think much as in the first... Well, in the first conversation, I was happy to lambast the government as much as I could here. I think they played an absolute blinder. I think those military strikes have worked. Fortunately, no one died. They do seem to have degraded Assad's chemical agent or manufacturing capability. That is something to be applauded. And I think in the... Well, OK, let me just say this. I think it's to her credit that in the debate that followed that this week, each and every single party leader said that Mrs May had contacted them prior, and so she contacted Jeremy Corbyn, which is absolutely right. I think Jeremy Corbyn is hamstrung by the fact that he's a pacifist. Now, actually, it's quite brave sometimes to be a pacifist. It's not easy to be a pacifist.
He can't bring himself to disagree with anything Russia does anywhere.
So he can't... He probably wouldn't even want to know. But here's 2 words, endgame, Phil.
Endgame, right. I'll come back to endgame. Let's just have a butcher's at what I was up to out there. Very quickly, all right?
From here, these lads spend all day monitoring the IS front line. And if they see anything move, then it's fair game.
1,000 metres village. 3 fingers right of village, small building and cops. In the distance, driving away from that, and you might not see him now because he's on a lane, is the ISIS motorcycle. And he's headed towards that village in the distance.
OK, so if I needed Corbyn's permission every time somebody needed to be clipped, I'd be on the phone a lot to Corbyn, wouldn't I? Is what I'm saying, all right? So, end game coming to you, all right? End game here. Those people need our help. They're in a lot of trouble, and if we just pull out and leave them, they're going to be even in more trouble. So we are in a big situation there where there's no immediate end to the problems, but we can't just abandon them.
Okay, Phil, but you're working with the Kurds. But that's Turkey's worst nightmare, isn't it? Turkey's also one of our allies.
All the different parts of this, if we pull out, the Kurds will come under more pressure. There's always going to be something going on there at the moment. There is no definite end game,
and that's my point about saying that whole region is so contentious. Anyway, let's see what Jeremy Corbyn actually said.
I believe that the action was legally questionable, and on Saturday the United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres said as much, reiterating that all countries must act in line with the United Nations Charter, which states action must be in self-defence or be authorised by the United Nations Security Council.
So that's what he said.
But it never was, June. 12 times Russia has blocked it.
Yeah.
12. What makes you think they won't a 13th time?
They will.
Of course they will. He's right. You have to have the elements. Corbyn is a pacifist. He's
not a soldier. He doesn't understand. So keep out of soldiers' business, basically, is what I'm saying to him.
Well, they have to be regulated, though, Phil.
They do need to be regulated. But I'm saying, we've got Cobber in place and we've got the Prime Minister in place.
But you almost seem to, and I'm sure I've misinterpreted, but say, let's go in and invade. You're not saying...
No, I'm not saying invade.
No,
I'm saying if a situation arises where we need to help and we need to intervene and we need to stand up and be counted, then those decisions have been made and the soldiers on the ground need to deal with it, not the politicians.
Can I just clarify what you said? It was 6 vetoes.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Phil, what did you feel as a soldier who's been out there when Trump said he was going to pull out US troops from the region then?
I think that would be catastrophic as well. I think until the whole thing is stabilised and in a position to hand over
Will it be stabilised?
And that's what I'm saying. We're in there, aren't we? And that's what I'm saying. The end game at the moment is unidentifiable.
Yeah.
But it's another futile exercise in just gesture war, isn't it? Because, you know, we'll go and bomb the hell out of these places. There's not only no end game, there's no reconstruction plan, there's nothing, there's no plan for civil, you know,
So what do you do? Just pull out and leave it, put the toy down, had enough of that, not playing with that anymore?
Phil, can I just ask you a question? Because I don't understand. When you're saying pull out, I didn't realise we had...
saying stay in.
He's saying stay in.
No, I know that, but leave it. But when you're saying we can't pull out, when you're talking about pulling out, I didn't realise we had like a huge presence in Syria.
We have a presence in Syria, yeah.
Big?
We have
Little? Because I didn't realise that.
It's right. We obviously are involved over there, as we know. You know, a sergeant was killed not a week ago. You know, okay. So we know we have a presence over there. We know our planes have gone over there, and they've been talking about and sanctioning, you know, strikes on designated targets. So we have a presence there. What I'm saying is, you can't just disappear. You can't just put that toy down and go, I'm not playing with that anymore, because we now have an obligation whereby we've been involved with something, and we now need to try and see it to its conclusion.
Phil, I need to clip you and move this 2 clicks on. 50 years ago this week, the MP Enoch Powell warned immigration would lead to the black man having the whip hand over the white man, and predicted it would lead to rivers foaming with much blood. And he blamed coloured immigrants for putting pressure on housing, schools and hospitals. Last weekend, the BBC broadcast in full the unapologetically racist and bigoted Rivers of Blood speech for the first time. Although the speech was interspersed with analysis, the decision sparked outrage. But I wholeheartedly support the BBC's decision. Why? Because those who forget history are condemned to repeat it. We're seeing the same power-light playbook driving policy today. Look at the Windrush deportations or the anti-immigrant rhetoric you hear from the right. It has never been more timely and urgent to revisit this infamous speech.
Rachel, I completely disagree with you on this. My parents came to this country around the time of the Enoch Powell speech. I think my mum was probably about 12 or so. And I think when you look at the way people responded at the time, this was a time when overt racism was commonplace in Britain. Yeah. It was normal. Even so, people were outraged. People were horrified. The majority of British people thought he had absolutely gone mad. And as a result, Enoch Powell was disgraced, his career in tatters, and the man died in shame. So my point is, if he had actually achieved what he intended that speech to do, if, you know, thousands of darkies were marched out of the country, then perhaps, I'm paraphrasing here, perhaps then that would be a speech that we should be revisiting. To me, I have no idea why certain parts of the press are giving this speech as much attention as they do. Because to me, it was something to be ashamed of, but it didn't have the desired impact, and actually we need to move on from it.
Before I bring in Nick, what I feel really strongly about it is it has made it possible for everybody to actually look at what is happening, not just here, but across Europe. We've seen the march of the far right in Hungary, under Orban, in Turkey, under Erdogan. We have seen, in a sense, the licensing of xenophobia, because the same power-light playbook is in action, and we have to be able to look at it in order to be able to talk about it and to condemn it.
But I don't think the two are the same at all. And in my opinion, the BBC playing this disgusting speech actually legitimises it. Yeah, but it's not as big a part of history as you're making it out to be, because of the impact it had. It didn't have the impact that he wanted it to have.
Let's just tell you what the BBC say about this, because it's understandably strong views, so we must give them the right of reply. This is from the BBC. Many people know of this controversial speech, but few have heard it beyond sound bites. In order to assess the speech fully and its impact on the immigration debate, it will be analysed by a wide range of contributors, including many anti-racism campaigners. This is a rigorous journalistic analysis of a historical political speech. It's not an endorsement of the controversial views. Before I join in, should we just hear a little bit from the man himself? We go back to this speech, 1968, Enoch Powell.
The sense of alarm and of resentment lie not with the immigrant population, but with those among whom they have come and are still coming. This is why to enact legislation of the kind before Parliament at this moment is to risk throwing a match onto gunpowder.
Said to be the brightest...
We're even showing that. I think we need to be a lot more responsible.
All right, OK. Said to be the brightest of his intake of Conservative politicians. I'd hate to have seen the slowest or the dumbest. Rachel's right, actually. You cannot censor history in this way.
I am not censoring history.
Respectfully, you are, because you're saying this shouldn't be played. As long as it's played in the way that it was contextualised, it had people saying what the impact was, it had people assessing it, dissecting it, because ultimately you're going to say, we better take Mein Kampf away. We must never, ever study that, because he also had some pretty loads of views. We better not really get into Lenin, because that's Pol Pot, not. These are vile individuals with... Hang on, just let me... These are vile individuals with hateful views. But if we decide we're going to censor this bit of history, where does it end, June?
Well, I'm glad you've used the examples that you have, because those speeches had the impact that they wanted. The point of those speeches...
It failed against the immigration bill.
Well, Mein Kampf...
No, but Powell's speech...
No,
it failed, yes.
My point is, this is what I'm saying. Enoch Powell was once a politician who was considered somebody that could easily be leader of the Conservative Party and PM one day. That speech destroyed his career.
OK, but my point, June, before we hear...
Why are we giving this speech all the attention we are?
I'll tell you why.
People were horrified at the time.
No, June, the point is that the price of the freedom we enjoy now is not just eternal vigilance, but also recollection. Because the things that he talked about, the anti-immigrant rhetoric that he was trying to inflame then, is abroad today, as Peter Hain found when he was campaigning in Wales before the referendum.
In the Brexit campaign, on the doorstep, knocking on doors in the South Wales valleys, and it was as if echoes of Powell's speech were coming off the doorstep about, you know, he used this phrase, we're becoming strangers in our own country, or people are becoming strangers in their own country. It was that kind of sentiment coming off the doorstep.
I mean, to have the same, probably unconscious echoes of what Powell said being heard on the doorstep. I mean, to me, I'm afraid what we've seen from the Brexit referendum since is the licensing of xenophobia. And one last thing, this has all made me feel that I not only have to campaign against the Brexit some of the hard rightism that has emanated from Brexit.
But actually, it's sort of to me when you say that.
It's not just Brexit now we've got to fight against. It's fascism.
You can't just look. You can't just say.
No, I'm not looking at
Brexit
you, Michelle. I'm not looking at you. I'll look at Michelle. Right. We have to fight against fascism.
I
now.
agree.
Not just Brexit.
Fascism.
Michelle, can I ask you a question, June? Yeah. Did you listen to the speech? Did you listen to the Radio 4 programme?
I didn't listen to the Radio 4 programme, but I've seen this speech many times.
So this is my problem with people that are criticising what the BBC did. Lots of people that are criticising, with respect, including you, are admitting that they didn't even listen to that programme. No. Now, I did.
Okay.
And it was an hour-long programme, and I listened to it. And I will hold my hands up and be honest. I've never, ever read or heard the entire speech in full. Never.
You've heard of the row?
Of course. I've heard of the row. I've heard of the rivers of blood. I've heard snippets, and I've formed opinions. But I'd never taken the time to read or watch or listen to the whole thing. When I did, and I watched this BBC programme, I found it very, listen to the programme Radio 4. I found it very educational and informative. It went through the speech and it really critically analysed what was said and why it was very, it portrayed it in a negative way. It was critical of it. And I'm not sure that many people would have listened to that and come away going, oh yeah, high five to Enoch Powell, he was right. They wouldn't have done. No, so what I'm saying is, to come back to your central point, I fully agree that the BBC was right to have done that programme, because how they did it was in an educated way.
And Phil, what did you think?
Right, the Enoch Powell thing, for me, you can't just put a blanket over your history. Do you know what I mean? It was said, okay, it was said, and if now people can analyse that and pull some good for it, then for me, every negative carries a positive somewhere along the line, do you know what I mean? So if BBC 4 decided to air that and critics have decided to pull it apart, if they can learn something from it, then for me it's a good thing.
Well, I'm not saying that you put a blanket over your history. I'm saying that we give this part of history way too much attention.
So why didn't
it hasn't been heard in full for 50 years.
But we're always talking about it. I mean, hello, whenever there's a right-wing conversation, we always go back to Enoch Powell. We're always talking about Enoch Powell.
Just the bits that the press have pushed to the fore. So now it has been put out fully, and more people are probably going to look at it.
And it's more timely than ever when you have, you know, a Tory conference saying that companies should list foreign workers. And we're having our EU citizens who've lived here for many years being told to prove they've lived here and worked here and all those things.
I'm fine to be on my own.
Without the analysis, I would be with you. This is about freedom of speech, my friends, but I'm afraid I'm curtailing all of that because we are moving on. You're watching The Pledge on Sky News. Up next, why I think NHS policy could be encouraging our kids to have underage sex. Let's see how you react to the following scenario. Your 13, 14 or 15-year-old daughter comes home from school and becomes increasingly prone to mood swings. She gains weight for no apparent reason and she complains about continual headaches. Concerned? Damn right you are. And then you discover the cause is a contraceptive implant that was fitted by the NHS at school without your knowledge. Some 10,600 girls aged 15 or below, including 39 aged 12 or under, were given such implants over the last couple of years. And patient confidentiality rules mean no parental consent is necessary. Now, granted, in a small number of cases, there will be genuine medical reasons for these procedures, and granted, many young people are going to want to have sex. But can anyone explain why the state is complicit in preparing underage girls to break the law without even telling mum or dad?
Nick, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
How old were you when you first had sex?
15.
Right, so you had illegal underage sex?
Yes.
Right. And how old was the girl that you were having sex with? Oh, OK, that's your story.
Yes, considerably older. It's almost a Mrs. Robinson thing.
I'm going to ask you another question.
Well, you didn't win on that one, but go ahead.
No, I did win, because you had illegal sex, which is something you're getting very exercised about. Would you prefer that girls under 16 had protected sex or had abortions?
I would prefer they had protected sex, so long as mum and dad know.
Right. So you
That's
think
my
that
problem.
girls who are going to have sex anyway are actually going to seek permission from their parents before they do, and that's all right then?
I think state...
Your argument.
I think state-sanctioned contraceptives such as this, where mum or dad doesn't know that their daughter has had something implanted in them, is akin to child abuse.
Right, Nick, I've got a slight issue with this one, right?
Go ahead.
I've got a slight issue with this one. I was brought up in a children's home in my teen years, all right? And... like yourself, you know, you have those urges from sort of like 13 plus. I was 13, mate. anyway, right. So, regardless, other children in the children's home had the same urges as me. All right.
Yep.
Now, out of the 4 girls that were there, 3 of them eventually fell pregnant. Okay, because they didn't want to say to the staff what they were doing because they felt that they would get in trouble for doing so. Okay.
Yes, okay.
The only girl that didn't get pregnant took the pill but told the staff. Okay, and that's how it happened. So I have a bit of an issue that, you know, if you shut the door like that, then children have got no one to turn to. They'll do it anyway.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? They will do it. So that's how it is.
June.
Nick, I completely agree with you.
Thank you.
Because we're also making the assumption that these young girls are having sex with other young people. We're not factoring sexual abuse here. And actually, to be honest with you, as a parent, I would want to know. So it's not a case of... I don't think, if I'm right, you're not saying you're against the girls being given the contraception. No. You're against their parents not knowing.
The problem here is it's to do with parents and children and sex. And the parents are the last people the children are obviously going to talk to if they want to have underage sex.
But is that something we should be encouraging as a society?
Is this such a big problem? I think the prevention of abortion is really important.
As a mum, it wouldn't bother you that your daughter...
To me, that's more important. It's more traumatic than a girl having underage sex.
And I think you have got a daughter, as I recall.
I do, yes.
And it wouldn't bother you that she had an implant in her arm and neither you nor your husband knew about it. So she's free to go. And a point well made, actually, have sex, never mind, with another 15-year-old boy, 25-year-old man.
As long as, look,
you're
to
happy.
Me, I'm happy if my daughter is safe and happy.
And you don't know that she's got a contraceptive.
If an implant is keeping her safe and happy and
she's getting
protected.
Headaches, mood swings.
You seem to know an awful lot about the medical side effects of implants.
Well, I read it in the paper, so it must
be
true.
I mean, that's not what I've heard.
Michelle.
Yeah.
Well, I was, you know, my mum will be watching this and she'll be mortified, but I would never have spoken to my mum about sex and sexual stuff or anything like that when I was a teenager. But irrelevant of that, I think it is so disturbing that a school, because some of this is going on in schools, etc., that the state can implant something into a child without parental knowledge or consent. That is really disturbing me. And for me, it feels like...
You say the state as if it's the people, the children...
No, but let me explain what I mean.
Sorry, what's the NHS?
When you say the state, what is clearly happening here is these teens are going to an adult they trust, and that is a teacher or a doctor or a nurse in the school, and then they are being dealt with.
But let me explain why it concerns me as well, because ultimately, for me, this is treating the symptom and not the cause. So there are many forms of contraception. Not least, you can use a condom, and I think that actually the problem is the lack of decent sex education within schools. Children get their sex education from porn. That's where the majority of their sex education is coming from in this day and age.
To all of them, and a lot more wider than what it was.
Thanks for the tip-off.
Phil's going to share some of his favourite sites.
You had to be tall enough to reach the top shelf when I was a kid. Do you know what I mean?
You're a tall guy there, so it was all right.
Both you and I have been young lads, right? Yeah. We would have egged on those respective girlfriends. Don't tell your mum, don't tell your girl. Go and tell Mrs. Jones. Say to Mrs. Jones you need one of those implants, and then happy days, we're off and running.
They weren't available then.
No, but today, and that's what these lads will be doing.
Yes.
And then suddenly this girl, without her parents' knowledge, we have provided her to go and have underage sex. And you two, who I really like, you both seem to say, yeah, well, it's a price worth paying.
The alternative...
These two.
I'm just saying
it's
happening anyway. It's happening anyway.
So we don't even try and combat it?
Well, I think that actually Michelle's put her finger on it.
That's it from Phil.
The issue seems to be the kid approaching the parent because the kid will be scared.
Exactly.
And I don't, I wasn't brought up with my parents, unfortunately, but, I wouldn't have wanted... Dad, just going to be knocking the back out of someone for a bit. Is it okay? You're not going to ask her. Do you know what I mean? That is not going to happen. That's not a conversation that any parent is ever going to have with their kid.
But this is parent or legal guardian, and actually what we should be encouraging is this is precisely the kind of conversations that parents should be having with their kids. At the end of the day, sometimes we sort of forget that sex is a big responsibility.
But how many children, as soon as the parent goes, I'll tell you what, son, sit down, we're going to talk about sex.
No, but back to Michelle's point, if we're making sure that kids are getting the right level of sexual education, they actually will feel much more comfortable having this conversation with their parents, and there won't be the same sort of embarrassment around it.
You want to
I'm afraid that
Rachel,
the elephant in the room as a child, as a teenager, or as a pubescent child and as an adult is, you know, the kids don't want to think the parents have sex, the parents don't want to think the kids are having sex. They're all having sex, but nobody talks about it, and this is why the kids are going to the schools and to the doctors.
But you don't need to implant something into somebody's arm
in order to... You don't have to, but it is
there are other forms of contraception, and we certainly shouldn't be doing it to under 12s. That's mad.
Well, I think it needs to be said there are medical reasons.
But
if you read into
in those cases, the parents would be informed then.
If there are medical reasons, and honestly, that is what it turns on, Phil. I hear what you're saying, and I know that the conversations. It's not an easy thing to sit with your children, and for the children to sit with their parents. But it comes to the thing, which I think really, my sense is what turned June on my side.
Yes.
Which is that mum and dad don't know. So if your daughter starts to feel ill, your daughter starts to get really difficult moods. I mean, teenage girls, it's not easy anyway. Your daughter maybe is doing all sorts of... And is open to disease.
OK, so the doctor should then betray the child's trust, it's been a big conversation. The child's come to the doctor, go, right, doctor, this is a big one for me. And then the doctor betrays the child's trust, goes to the parents and says, this has happened. The parents now know, but now the child or the next child goes, tell you what, I know the doctor's a great shot.
We live in a country where if a child falls in the playground and scrapes his knee, at some schools they won't put the Band-Aid on in case they're allergic to the plant. But we will give you a contraceptive implant without telling mum and dad. It's bloody ridiculous.
It's not the person who's responsible for putting that bandage on. It's a doctor that's making this decision, and the doctor that's talking to the child.
Warped priorities.
Can I say one thing quickly? Back to Michelle's point about condoms. So what we're doing is we're actually encouraging young people to have unprotected sex. So, like you say, we don't need to implant anybody. With the rise of STDs and goodness knows what else, let's at least encourage them to use condoms.
So you're saying it's OK if you use a condom?
I'm not saying that. I'd rather that than be implanting 12-year-olds.
Don't tell mum and dad to use condom. Right, get out of that.
Much rather that.
I think we should go to a break. We can continue sex education with Phil in the break. It's me after the break, and I'm arguing that some Brits do need to be banged up abroad. I might not have mentioned this before, but I'm from Hull. And I am a fierce supporter of our city and the people in it. But recently, I found myself in the uncomfortable position of not fighting for one of our own, a lady called Laura Plummer. Last October, Laura visited Egypt and took with her over 300 tramadol tablets, apparently for her boyfriend. Tramadol, a powerful painkiller, is legal here with a prescription, but illegal in Egypt. Laura was caught, arrested and sentenced to 3 years in prison. Ever since, there's been a campaign to get her released involving the media and our local MP. My heart breaks for her friends and her family, and I can see their pain. However, I can't bring myself to join their fight. Breaking the law has consequences. And if we decide to be Brits abroad, we should respect the laws of their land too. And if we don't, we should expect to pay the price, however harsh that may seem.
Right, OK. Immediately, straight off the bat, I agree with that.
Why am I frightened of you? I feel like I want to run away.
I agree with what you're saying, all right? OK, in principle. However, the common sense gene that we've got in our authorities has also been implanted in some of these other places around the world, and some of the things that people seem to go away for are ridiculous. OK, and I'll give you an example. The Chennai 6, OK, they tipped up into India. They were security guards on a ship, OK. They had the paperwork in place, but the Indian authorities disagreed with their paperwork. They took the whole ship and they put them in prison, OK? They tried them for having illegal possession of weapons, even though their paperwork was what they should have had, and they ended up doing 4 years in prison, OK? Eventually, they were released down to campaigning. I was on the campaign myself, OK? And everybody tried their best to get them out. As it was, they served most of their time, and they were allowed to go. They suffered illness and all sorts of stuff in those nicks over there, because they're not, you know, they're not the sort of like cat C's we get over here when you can have your PlayStation and all that sort of stuff, do you know what I mean? They're proper hard nicks, all right? OK? And when you see people getting lifted for tramadol, I'm like that. Well, hang on a minute, do you know what I mean? It's hardly Class A drugs, is it? You know what I mean? So I have sympathy in the fact that, you know, A, the drug that she had wasn't, you know, she probably wasn't even aware, to be honest, that she was breaking any law in the first place.
Yeah. Right,
so that's where my drama is. And like I say, the common sense gene is all over the place with this
so
one.
a few things. I don't know the case that you just mentioned, but if it's as you just described, that sounds very odd to me, so I'm with you. But specifically about this, when you say, oh, it's only tramadol, it's not a Class A, well, actually, if you've got tramadol in this country without a prescription, it's regarded as a Class C. So it is regarded as a drug. Number two, I mean, how you can say I wasn't aware that something was illegal in Egypt. Well, if it wasn't illegal in Egypt, I suspect that the person who apparently needed it would have been able to get it himself over there. You do not, so there was not a prescription issue to this person in this case for these drugs. So this person had these drugs in the UK without prescription, which is absolutely wrong in its first instance. To take them into a foreign country, I'm sorry, you cannot do that. And if you choose to do that, there will be consequences. And it's deeply unpleasant. My heart breaks for this family. I see them and I feel so sad. But unfortunately, you've committed a crime, so you have to pay the time. Well, sorry.
Michelle, I agree with you. Whoa, let me finish. I agree with you in that, you know, if you are taking drugs into another country, then you do the crime, then do the time. But it may be true. Maybe she didn't know. I think there are a lot of people, myself included, that go to many countries around the world and you don't know what all their laws are. And with your case about whether or not the boyfriend would have been able to get hold of the drug in the country, perhaps it wasn't sold in the country. So you know, my family in Ghana, they're always asking us to send a particular brand of tinned tomatoes because they're not sold in Ghana. Right. And so we send them whenever we go. We've got like big trunk loads of the stuff we take with us. So she may not have known. So I feel sorry for her, but I agree with you.
If you're wheeling along a suitcase of tinned tomatoes, probably...
But this is a drug that's banned in Egypt, so there's no way this man...
Okay.
So
he would have known.
And apparently the boyfriend's got chronic back pain and it solves chronic... Just on the... where do you stand on the number of foreign prisoners in British jails serving their time here? Are you comfortable with that?
Yeah. Well, I have to be, or else I contradict my own argument. Because when I look at the stats, there is a lot of foreign prisoners. Yes, you saw the numbers as I did. Yeah, and then I sit there and I think, with my common sense head on, hang on a minute. I think, hang on a minute, why are we paying for those guys to be in our prison? So I'm uncomfortable with that. But then I
Doesn't that defeat
myself.
The very
No, that's
central...
what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. So therefore, I then have to have a word with myself and recheck and say, well, actually, I have to be comfortable with that because I do believe if you go into a foreign country and you break their laws, I do believe that you will be imprisoned, etc., in those countries, and I think that's right. So I can't be a hypocrite and think that's right, but then have a problem with it.
I don't disagree with what you're saying, Michelle, but what I'm saying is each case throws up an individual case, and they need to be scrutinised, and you know what I mean. You can't just write people off if they have done wrong in that country.
I'm not suggesting writing anyone off.
If they have done wrong in that country, then you're rightly so. You know they'll get punished.
Isn't it the scale of it? We're talking 300 pills. If it had been 30 or something like that, you could have put it down.
If
300 is an extraordinary
amount. If you've got
amount.
a box of painkillers and you go off, that's an entirely different matter. When you've got 300 or hundreds of tablets that you yourself shouldn't even have. I mean, don't get me started onto we've got an NHS in this country that's creaking at the seams, but yet somehow you've got people taking these drugs. They wasn't prescribed to her, Rachel.
She said she got them off a friend, didn't she?
Oh, that's all right then.
Can I just say, what I feel this is about is the key to all this is common sense. People should actually look up on TripAdvisor or on a Foreign Office website.
Self included.
You know, the actual customs and rules, and particular, and if something should be flagged up, like, you know, you're not allowed to take prescription meds to Egypt, or you're not allowed to take naked selfies on a sacred mountain in Cambodia. Or
what the hell? What am I going to do now?
Well, you're not allowed to do... You're not allowed to do, pornographic dancing. Some chap has...
What's you done?
Every day, all day long. You know, then I think, you know, it has to be buyer beware and when in Rome, and all those old rules applies. So, you know, otherwise our British consulates abroad are going to have nothing else to do.
Honest, true people on the streets of Hull, what would they say?
I think opinion would be... Cause I think a lot of people would be like me. You feel a loyalty... I feel a loyalty to this person, because I do. I just regard her as... She's just the same as me. She's a whole girl. She's a whole girl.
Well, Michelle, can I show you what another whole girl had to say, which is her sister, Jane Sinclair. Let's have a look.
She's absolutely terrified. She's petrified. She looks shocking. She's shock white. Her hair's fallen out. Her teeth are all discoloured. She's got a rash all over her face. She's probably on the verge of a mental breakdown. She's in absolute shock.
Oh, bless her. I do feel for her.
And I feel for her. I think it's terrible. I said that in my intro. When I watch that, my heart breaks. But unfortunately, you can't then go, oh, she's on the verge of a breakdown.
Two blokes holding hands in Dubai. Should they go to jail?
No, but here's the thing.
But they have well, they've been arrested.
Hold on.
I'm touching a man's hip.
Hold on. If you said to me, Michelle, have you ever been to Dubai? My answer is no. If you ask me then why, I don't trust myself not to get arrested within about half an hour of touching down the plane, because I know I'll do something that I probably shouldn't be doing, and I'll end up in a lot of trouble. Right, anyway, that's almost it. But just before we go, there's time for this week's award. Now, it's been one of the flashpoints of international politics for years, but this week it seemed we might be one step closer to progress on the thorny issue of North Korea. CIA Chief Mike Pompeo travelled for covert talks with Kim Jong-un, laying the groundwork for President Trump's upcoming meeting with Kim. Here's the Donald speaking after the news emerged.
They do respect us. We are respectful of them. And we're going to see what happens. We will bring up the abductees. We'll bring up many different things. I think it's a time for talking. It's a time for solving problems.
He may not be famous for his diplomacy, but for making progress where many people thought none was possible. Mr. President, you get our Statesman of the Week, much to June's annoyance.
Maybe they could get the same barber as well.
Right, that's all we've got time for this week. But if you want to join in the debate, just search for The Pledge on Facebook or Twitter. Thanks for watching.